Kay is a land subsidence expert with a strong background in coastal geology. He has a profound interest in anthropogenic soils in relation to subsidence and coastal geological buildup. So today, Kay is going to be talking to us about anthropogenic sediments and their role in coastal subsidence. Thank you, Kay.
Yes, thanks for the introduction, and thanks, of course, for hosting this event. It's really interesting so far. So I'm going to talk about anthropogenic sediments, but in substance, but I'm going to focus only on the Netherlands. So that's not in my title, but that's always good to know in advance. So before we dive into the anthropogenic sediments, I want to tell a little bit about substance in the Netherlands, because the Netherlands it's a relatively small country. It's a coastal country, so it's naturally low lying and it's heavily populated. And it's not only busy above ground, it's also very busy in the subsurface. And the subsurface activities, the human subsurface activities are causing the land to subside. And on the left-hand side, you see what we call an INSAR map. So this is a satellite-based image, and it shows the vertical land motion. So in red, you see the areas that go down, and in blue, you see the areas that go up. And I just use this for illustration to give you an idea what's happening. So we have mining activities below ground in the north, so hydrocarbon extraction, salt solution mining. We have some reclaimed areas in the center of the Netherlands, which are subjected to clay shrinkage. We have peat oxidation in the western coastal plain. So this is the coastal plain with all the major cities. And in the south, we have the rising of the former coal mines. So these coal mines are below ground and they used to subside a lot when active, and now they are rising again after mining ceased. But this is the situation present day, but humans are inducing substance in the Netherlands for quite some time now. The oldest evidence that we found is already dates back to the Iron Age and the Bronze Age. And substance really took off in the 1,000 years ago when the coastal plains were drained. And after all those millennia of human interference with the natural system, we have a map that looks like that on the right-hand side. So this is an elevation map, and I only selected the areas that are coastal plain or river plain, and everything that's red is above mean sea level, and everything that's blue is below mean sea level. So you can see that large areas of the onshore part subsided way below sea level, even 4, 5 to 6 meters. So at present, we have a strong coastal defense system to protect us, to protect the low-lying subsided areas against the floods and sea aggressions. However, in the past, they did not have this. In the past, they did something else. So they made these little mounds using anthropogenic material, salts from nearby, for instance, but also rubbish. And they created these dwelling mounds. And this practice dates back to the Bronze Age and the Iron Age. So already back then, the coastal plain was subsiding due to human activity, drainage primarily, and they were suffering floods. And on the elevation map on the left-hand side, where red is high and blue is low, you can see all these small red dots. And these are all centuries, millennia old dwelling mounds. And the one I show you here on the photo in the middle, that's allegedly the oldest one in the Netherlands. It has been continuously occupied since the Bronze Age, and it's old and it's also very stiff. So the anthropogenic material inside of this mound is very stiff. But in contrast, the coastal plain surrounding it, it has younger clay in its subsurface. That's very prone to subsidence. So especially now Northwestern Europe is facing severe summer droughts. We notice that this clay is shrinking and swelling, and it inflicts damage to the built environment. So on the right-hand side, you see colleagues of mine installing monitoring equipment nearby this dwelling mound to monitor the surface movements. So in the very, let's say, archaeological past, we used anthropogenic sediments to keep their feet dry. But in the more, let's say, historical past, so in the Middle Ages and onwards, we used anthropogenic sediments to increase the load-bearing capacity of the soggy coastal plain. So this is an image of Gouda, known for the cheese. It's an urban area in the middle of the peaty part of the coastal plain. And in the elevation map, you can see blue and greenish colors. So those are the low-lying peaty areas. They are below mean sea level. But in the middle, you see like a little bit of an elevated zone with red and yellow colors, and that's the historical city center of Gouda. So they piled up meters of thick anthropogenic sediments to enable construction, because otherwise they could not do that in the past. And increasing the load-bearing capacity of the soggy soil is not only something from the past, we are still doing that in the present day. This is a photo from an exposure of the youngest town in the Netherlands. So in the Netherlands, we still are making new towns. It's Hoevenhaag, that's where I happen to live. And I took this photo during the construction phase. So the natural surface it's river clay, and they heightened it. They increased the load-bearing capacity by adding over 2 meters of anthropogenic sediments, and this is primarily clay. And the reason why they chose for clay is to, let's say, mimic the natural deposits in the anthropogenic deposits. So maybe you already know what's going to happen. If you add fresh clay on clay, then you get subsidence and settlement. So on the right-hand side, you see a photo of a part of my front yard. It's we paved it just over a year ago, and if you look at where the pencil is at the wall, you can see there's a little bit of sagging going on. So this is the settlement of the anthropogenic clay. So my neighbors are not happy with that, but I think it's of course fascinating. So how much anthropogenic sediments did we add in the Netherlands throughout the centuries? Well, colleagues of mine, they nicely visualized this using a simplified version of the geological map of the Netherlands. So on the left-hand side, you see the natural deposits, and on the right-hand side, you see in dark gray the patches of anthropogenic sediments. So these are primarily cities, but also infrastructures and archaeological features such as the dwelling mounds. But still, we don't know how much sediments it is. And we wanted to know that. So therefore, we used a 3D geological model. So I work at a geological survey, and one of the things that we are doing is constructing 3D geological subsurface models. This one is Geotop. It's a voxel model. A voxel stands for volumetric pixel. So that means you can quantify stuff, and you can do calculations, etc. So we thought, well, okay, I'm gonna use my pointer now. So let's determine the volume of the anthropogenic sediments in the coastal and in the river plain. So it's the gray stuff, and compare that with the fluvial sediments that came in the past 10,000 years, and compare that with the tidal sediments that came in the past 10,000 years, just to give us an idea of the amounts. Then we got this graph, and just for brevity, I will only focus on the lower right one, so on this one. And there you see the quantity of sediments that were brought in by the different systems. So we have approximately 20 cubic kilometers of sediments brought in by the rivers, more than double of that by the tidal systems, and approximately 3.6 cubic kilometers for anthropogenic sediments were brought in by humans in the coastal and the river plain only. And just as an interesting exercise, we did a back of the envelope calculation. We thought, well, let's see how much anthropogenic sediments do we need to elevate the coastal plains of the Netherlands safely above mean high water. So if you remember the elevation map I showed you in the beginning, we have large areas that are below mean sea level. We thought, well, they are starved from natural sediment, so the rivers and the tidal channels are not able to sedimentate there anymore. So we thought, well, let's see how much sediments do we need to make it into one big, safe, happy dwelling mound. And we need approximately 4 times more anthropogenic sediments to raise the coastal plain to safe elevation with respect to mean high water in the present day scenario, and 5 to 7 times for the projected mean high water scenarios of the IPCC. So this is, of course, a lot, large volumes of sediments. It's more than the river system was able to brought in. It might not be a realistic scenario, but it opens doors for discussion with, for instance, policymakers. So how do the anthropogenic sediments look like? This is another example. It's a core conducted through the city of Alphen aan den Rijn. It's on the interface between the river area and the coastal area, it's every bar is a meter. So we have 5 meters of core, and the bottom 3.5 meters are natural deposits. So the brownish colors are peat. So you see some root fragments, and in between you see the clay from the river system. And here at minus 1 meter 40, we have a sharp transition. It's a transition between the natural subsurface and the anthropogenic sediments. So this is all anthropogenic sediments. And you can see already that the anthropogenic sediments has a wide variety of colors. It has a different composition, different types of sand. But which is of course also very noticeable is the pollution. So here we core through some sort of plastic pipe, and here we have some isolation materials embedded in the subsurface. So the anthropogenic materials are helping us with the subsidence issues, but they can also contain pollution. But there's also something peculiar going on with the anthropogenic sediments with respect to subsidence, and that's that we found that they are actually mitigating subsidence in the peaty area. So in the western coastal plain, where most of the major cities are located, such as Amsterdam or Rotterdam, also Gouda, the subsurface is very peaty. And there they increase the load-bearing capacity of the plain for construction purposes with anthropogenic sediments. And this is an exposure that little bit explains what I'm gonna tell. Here you see some peat. It's a little bit blackish because it's subjected to oxidation, but it's also being buried by sediments. And the burying of the sediments is compressing the peat, making it more stiff and less prone to compaction, but it's also at some places pushing the peat down below the groundwater level, and therefore it's also preserved and protected against oxidation. So again, we also wanted to quantify this. So again, we took geotop. This is a top view of the Rotterdam area. Here's the city of Gouda again. The gray parts are the anthropogenic raised soil areas, the urban centers. This is just the surface, but you see that at some places there's peat at the surface, it's brown, and the other areas you have clay. But if you look at the cumulative thickness of the peat in this part of the Netherlands, we get this map. So it's up to 6 meters of thickness in the agriculture areas and also underneath the city of Gouda. And under Rotterdam, and there are also some patches of thick clay beds. Sorry, thick peat beds. So what we did, we took a groundwater level model and we run several scenarios of groundwater level lowering. Well, we see that the compression, so the compression of the peat layers by groundwater changing, is the pattern really matches the distribution of the peat. But what's really striking is, of course, this map. So this is the oxidation of the peat. If you lower the groundwater level with during several scenarios, we saw that in the urban areas of Rotterdam and also in Delft, the peat is really shielded off from the atmosphere, from the unsaturated zone, and that really stops the peat oxidation. So you can so actually the anthropogenic sediments are preserving the peat. And this is not something that we are only seeing in the modern city, so to say. There's also something that we observed in the dwelling mounds. So we go back to the north of the Netherlands. Here we have the dwelling mounds again. So these dwelling mounds were constructed 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, and they were also constructed on peat. So that peatland was subsiding at that time. So they constructed mounds on that peat. And a colleague of mine, he cored through one of these mounds, and underneath it he found this nicely preserved peat layer. It's a little bit blackish, but it's still there. And in between you see some flood layer. And he also cored adjacent to the dwelling mound, and there he found that the peat completely disappeared. It completely oxidized. It vanished, and the only thing that remains is this thin, let's say, organic residue of what used to be a peat layer. And this flood layer, the clay flood layer in between, is still nicely visible. So also in the past, the construction work using the anthropogenic sediments is preserving the peat. And this is not only important with respect to surface lowering, but also greenhouse gas emissions. So oxidizing and subsiding peatlands are emitting large quantities of carbon dioxide. So the anthropogenic sediments are actually preventing that. So just in short, what I told you, anthropogenic sediments play an important role in coastal subsidence in the Netherlands. They were used or are used to gain coastal plain elevation and to increase the load-bearing capacity. They also protect peat against further oxidation, but we also have to be careful because it often contains plastics and other unwanted material, and itself can also settle, which is a negative effect.